Hello, friends. Thank you for being here. Each of you makes this channel alive and special. Thanks to your support, I can share stories, thoughts, and emotions that hopefully resonate in your heart. If you have just started exploring my content, welcome. Real-life stories are waiting for you here. Subscribe, like, and share your impressions. Your voice is very important to me. I swung by my daughter's place on Thanksgiving, not expecting much, just a quick surprise visit. But there was my grandson, shivering outside in a t-shirt and shorts, and the temperature was a biting 15 degrees. Inside, everyone was warm and laughing, gathered around the holiday table, completely oblivious. I stormed in, furious, dropping 6 words that left them stunned. That was only the beginning of a major shift for them. Just as the scene was sinking in, I got a text from my neighbor. "Police are at the Hendersons again. Domestic issue. Reminds me of your family worries." I thought about that while my old Chevy idled in the driveway. Martha used to be concerned about the Hendersons' grandson, too, back when she was around. Now it's just me, troubled by thoughts of Leona's marriage. By 2:30 p.m., I knew it was time to hit the road, so I pulled onto Miller Street. Snow that had started only an hour earlier had thickened, making the roads tricky. The radio buzzed with weather alerts as I merged onto I-75, heading toward Cincinnati, with Led Zeppelin accompanying my mood. In the passenger seat were 2 gift bags, a pricey leather baseball glove for Amos, and some comic books that might be too young for him now. But I figured heroes don't age, even at 18. Martha used to say, "Family is all we have," whenever I complained about the holidays. She was always right. Ever since she passed 6 months ago, family time feels extra delicate. My windshield wipers struggled with the accumulating snow, while other cars moved cautiously, hazard lights blinking. I kept a steady 40 mph pace, knowing it's better to be late than not arrive at all. As I neared Cincinnati, I attempted to call Leona, hoping to give them a heads up, but the phone went to voicemail, which wasn't typical for a Thanksgiving afternoon. While passing a brightly lit gas station, I decided to stop. I filled up the tank, got a coffee, and snagged some peppermints for Amos. "Looks rough out there," the young clerk remarked, noting the snow. "You headed far?" "Just to Cincinnati for a family dinner," I said. "Take it easy. Already been 3 accidents today." Back in the Chevy, I glanced at the clock. 3:05 p.m. What was supposed to be a 45-minute drive was stretching to an hour. My thoughts wandered to Amos, maybe helping out in the kitchen or chilling with Wilbur, watching the game. Last summer at Lake Erie, he reeled in his first big catch, eyes sparkling with excitement. But I remember noticing a bruise on his arm then, which he shrugged off as a bike accident, though it looked suspiciously like a handprint. I regretted not pushing more. Martha would have known exactly what to do. Snow kept coming down as I took exit 15 toward Leona's neighborhood, with its 2-story homes adorned with leftover Halloween decorations and autumn wreaths. Some houses had already switched to Christmas lights, glowing underneath the snow. As I rolled through Maple Grove, I saw homes likely filled with family gatherings, sharing laughter and stories, their warm glow spilling onto snowy lawns. Today was supposed to be about healing. Martha would have wanted it that way. Approaching Leona's street, I spotted their familiar blue 2-story house with white shutters. Her car was parked next to a truck in the driveway. Smoke coiled up from the chimney, and holiday decorations livened up the front porch. Everything looked picture-perfect, maybe a bit too picture-perfect. Getting closer, I imagined their shock when I knocked. Would Amos still dash up for a hug like when he was little? Maybe this Thanksgiving would be a turning point for our family, just as Martha always hoped. I parked right behind Wilbur's truck, the engine grumbling into silence. Through the snow, twinkling lights draped the front door, and gentle strains of music floated from inside. The scene was like a painting from Norman Rockwell, alive and breathing. Then I spotted someone. Amos was huddled on the front steps, hugging his knees, dressed only in a thin, long-sleeved shirt and jeans, both lightly coated with snow. He didn't have a coat or hat, and he was shivering, not just from the cold, but from something much deeper. "You've got to be kidding me," I mumbled quietly, swinging open the truck door. As soon as I stepped out, the sharp, cold wind hit me. As I walked over to him, I could see his lips had turned blue, and he was holding onto his body tightly to try and stay warm. "Amos!" I shouted, hurrying across the slippery driveway. "What are you doing out here?" He glanced up, and the relief in his eyes nearly broke me. His face was so pale, almost gray, with red spots from the harsh cold. "Grandpa," he barely whispered, his voice shaking so much he could hardly speak. I was already taking off my heavy winter coat and wrapping it around him before he could continue. The poor kid was freezing, shaking all over like a leaf in a storm. "You can't what? Can't do what?" I asked, helping him to stand as his legs nearly gave out. "How long have you been out here?" "I'm not supposed to," he said, clutching my coat, the shivers cutting right through it. "I'm not allowed in the house." His words hit me like a blow. Behind us, I could hear the cheerful noise and see the glow coming from the windows of a family gathering. Inside was warmth and laughter, while my grandson was left out here in the cold, practically as a punishment. "What do you mean, not allowed?" I demanded, my frustration flaring up like a fire. "This is your home." Amos flinched at my tone, and I quickly softened it. The last thing he needed was another harsh voice. "Please, don't make it worse for me," he begged, glancing nervously at the front door. "Please, Grandpa, if Wilbur hears—" I really looked at the house, the joyful decorations, the lights, the sounds of celebration. Then I turned back to Amos, his blue lips, shivering in clothes that wouldn't even cut it at 50 degrees, let alone in this freezing weather. "How long have you been out here, Amos?" I asked as gently but firmly as I could. He wouldn't meet my gaze. "Since this morning." I checked my watch. It was past 3 p.m. "It's freezing out here, son. You could get frostbite." I stopped myself from scaring him any more than he already was. I tried the door handle. Locked. Of course, they locked him out on Thanksgiving, letting him freeze while they feasted. I said, guiding him to my truck, "Let's get you warm. You need to get in the cab and get warm." As I helped him, the pieces started to come together in my mind. The way he flinched when I raised my voice, the bruises I noticed during our fishing trips, the way he moved like he wanted to disappear. This wasn't new. This was a pattern. "Amos," I said gently, settling him in the passenger seat and cranking the heat up, "I need you to tell me what happened today." I pulled a blanket from my emergency kit and wrapped it around him, his hands too frozen to hold it on his own, so I placed mine over his, trying to warm them. "Talk to me, son," I urged softly. I kept my voice level, even though my anger was boiling. "So, what happened this morning?" He looked at his still trembling hands. "I was helping Mom with the turkey," he replied softly, a bit ashamed. "She asked me to check it while she was in the shower." He hesitated. "I forgot to turn off the oven timer after I took it out to baste." "You forgot a timer?" I asked. "So the turkey got a little extra crispy. It's not ruined, just a bit darker." Finally, he looked up, and fear was all over his face. "Wilbur came in, saw it, and lost it," he said as my jaw clenched. "What do you mean, lost it?" He started shouting about how I ruined the whole day, embarrassed the family, made it look like Mom couldn't cook, Amos explained, pulling the blanket tighter. Then he told me to stay outside until I learned responsibility. "And your mother?" I asked, trying not to sound too harsh. Amos looked away. "She tried to say something at first, but Wilbur told her to butt out, said it was between him and me." He took a deep breath. "She stayed quiet after that." I checked the time. 3:20. "Amos, when did all this go down?" Around 11 this morning, he said. So that was 4.5 hours. 4.5 teeth-chattering hours over a turkey that was only a little overdone and probably still tasted fine. I had to gather myself before speaking without shouting. Has this happened before? The question just floated there. I could almost see him weighing whether to come clean, balancing the fear of being honest against the comfort of telling someone. Sometimes, he whispered, when I mess something up. Last month, he left me locked in the garage overnight because I forgot to take out the trash. Another time, I spent 2 days in the basement over a broken beer bottle of his. Each admission felt like a gut punch. Looking at my grandson, someone so smart and kind, I saw in his cautious posture how he seemed to think taking up too much space was dangerous. Does your mom know about this? I ventured. She says Wilbur's just trying to teach me discipline, that I need to step up my game. His voice wavered. Maybe she's right. Maybe I am just... Don't, I cut in, fully turning towards him. Don't you dare blame yourself for this. What he's calling discipline is actually abuse. And it stops right here, right now. Amos's eyes grew wide with worry. No, Grandpa, please. If you make a scene, he'll just make it worse for me later. That's his thing. Through the windshield, I saw the house, all warm and festive, buzzing with laughter and music as my daughter played hostess, unaware her stepson shivered in the truck, too scared to expect basic kindness. Listen, I said, gripping his hands. You're 18. You don't have to deal with this anymore, and I'm not going to let you. But where would I go? I've got no money. College isn't happening without... You're coming home with me tonight, I said firmly, each word cementing my decision. We'll sort out everything else soon enough. Hope and fear clashed in his eyes. Hope because maybe, just maybe, someone was finally going to have his back. Fear because he'd learned that real change might be too much to wish for. He won't let me just leave, Amos said quietly. He'll call the cops and say I stole something or that you're kidnapping me. I looked over at the house, decorated to the nines, and felt an icy determination settle in. Martha was the peacemaker of the family, the one who would usually smooth things over with empathy. But she wasn't here now, and peaceful talks weren't going to stop my grandson from freezing in the cold. Forget Wilbur, I told him, opening the truck door. Right now we're getting your stuff. I stepped out into the snow, boots crunching through the growing layer. Behind me, I heard Amos follow, still wearing my coat. The front door was locked, but I hadn't planned on knocking. I pulled Amos close, not just shaking from the chill, but from the simmering anger. When you finally grasp the whole truth, it's like getting hit by a freight train. Why didn't you say it was this serious? I asked, looking more closely at his face. On closer inspection, I noticed faint bruises along his jaw, part shrouded by shadows and chilled skin. I tried to give hints, he murmured, tugging my coat tighter. But you always just talk to Mom, and she... The memory hit me with the force of a shockwave when I recalled last month, the time Amos called during dinner prep. His voice was tiny and unsure. Grandpa Wilbur says I can't eat with them anymore, says I have to earn my place back at the table. I'd laughed it off, figured it was typical teenage drama. I called Leona the next day, and she brushed it aside with that casual indifference she'd mastered since marrying Wilbur. Dad, you're making too much of it. It's just normal family discipline. Amos likes to exaggerate. You know how teenagers can be. Another memory came to mind. A summer phone call, Amos sounding drained. Mom, Wilbur got mad at me again for leaving dishes in the sink. He made me wash every dish in the house twice. When I later asked Leona about it, she'd let out this weary sigh. He's just exaggerating. Wilbur's trying to teach him some responsibility. How long has he been treating you this way? I asked, even though I dreaded what I might hear. Ever since Mom married him 3 years ago, Amos whispered. It started with small things, like redoing chores if they weren't up to his standard. Then it just kept getting worse. I thought back to the fishing trip this summer. Amos had been reluctant to go home and kept suggesting we stay out on the lake longer. When I asked why, he would just shrug and say he liked the lake. But now I realized what he was really trying to avoid. The way he went quiet when I mentioned taking him back home, or the shadow that appeared on his face when we talked about school starting, made sense now. "The thing about sleeping in the basement," I said as it clicked in my mind. "You mentioned the garage before. How many times?" "Too many to count," he replied, staring down at his hands, weighed down by shame. "Last winter he kicked me out for forgetting to shovel the driveway. I ended up sleeping in your truck during your Christmas Eve visit." My truck. He spent Christmas Eve in my truck while I was inside enjoying eggnog, thinking it was a great family holiday. Guilt hit me, feeling like a punch right to my gut. I looked at the house, warm and filled with laughter, a perfect suburban holiday scene, while outside my grandson nearly froze. "Does your mom know about all this?" Amos nodded sadly. "She keeps saying Wilbur's just trying to make me a better person, telling me not to be so sensitive and to learn the rules." Now anger was bubbling up, focused and intense. It felt like my vision was becoming clearer. Martha had always warned me to control my temper, telling me to count to 10 before reacting. But Martha wasn't here, and counting wouldn't help my grandson. I got up, still keeping Amos in my coat. "Come on, we're going inside." "Grandpa, no, please. Making a scene will..." "Will what? Make you sleep outside in the cold, hurt you, or starve you?" I interrupted him, voice stern. "Son, it's already as bad as it can get." Amos looked at the front door, fear in his eyes. You don't know what he's like when he's challenged. But I'd already decided. I headed toward the house, my grandson trailing behind, unsure but following. The front door was solid and pricey, just like Wilbur's ego. Didn't bother knocking. I just aimed my boot at it, right by the lock, full force. At 68, years of factory work gave me strength many men half my age didn't have. The wood shattered loudly, the door flying open and hitting the wall. Warm air rushed out, filled with the smell of roasted turkey and the silence of pure shock. We stepped inside, Amos by my side, into a scene that left me frozen. The dining room was like a glossy magazine spread, white tablecloth, flickering candles, crystal glasses sparkling in the light. Wilbur sat at the head of the table, looking sharp and ready to carve. Leona was beside him, in a green dress I hadn't seen before, her hair done perfectly. A young girl, maybe 10, had her fork of mashed potatoes mid-air, suspended in surprise. It was like time had paused in this perfect holiday scene. Here they were, cozy and feasting while Amos had been left outside for over 4 hours in the cold. The turkey looked perfect, likely there as a replacement for the one they said Amos ruined. It was all supposed to be peaceful and picture-perfect, just like a Thanksgiving card, if not for the harsh reality of leaving a kid out in the cold. "Are you out of your minds?" I shouted, breaking the silence. The little girl dropped her fork with a clatter. Leona went pale, her spoon hitting the table and splashing gravy everywhere. "Dad?" Leona's voice shook. "What are you doing here? Eating like kings while a boy froze outside?" I pointed to Amos, still in my coat, shivering in the heated room. 4 hours outside, Leona. 4 hours in bitter cold. Wilbur calmly set his knife down and stood up. He seemed more intimidating than I remembered, probably carrying 50 extra pounds over me. But dealing with fights wasn't new to me. It wasn't about size when anger was driving you. "Who do you think you are barging into my home?" He spoke with a calmness that had a hint of menace, like someone not used to being opposed. He pointed out this was private property and I was trespassing. I could sense him assessing me, trying to see if he could scare me into leaving. Puffing out his chest, he took a deliberate step in our direction, like a man accustomed to being in charge. "Private property, huh?" I advanced toward him. "You mean the same place where you left my grandson out in the cold while you had dinner?" The younger daughter burst into tears, unable to grasp what was happening. Leona tried to calm her but kept her eyes glued to me, caught between her loyalty to her father and her husband. "It's family business," Wilbur declared, his voice rising slightly. "What does this have to do with you?" "What does it?" I felt a surge of anger ignite within me. "That's my grandson you abandoned out there in the cold over your so-called family matters." Behind me, Amos crept closer, shivering as much from fear as from the lingering chill. It was clear that Wilbur's home wasn't accustomed to such confrontations. Things were about to get chaotic. In the background, holiday music played softly, extolling gratitude and family harmony. It would have been almost laughable if I hadn't been so furious that it clouded my thoughts. I gestured toward Amos, my hand steady amidst the swirl of emotions. "Look at him, Wilbur. Really see what you've done." Wilbur folded his arms and raised his head defiantly, fully convinced of his moral superiority. "The boy ruined our celebration. He needed to learn about responsibility and its consequences." "A lesson?" I was astonished by his words. "You nearly froze him over a burnt turkey. He's 18, not a child. And this is my house with my rules." Wilbur's voice held that condescending tone of someone who believed they were being fair. "I'm instilling discipline," something his mother evidently overlooked. Leona winced but stayed quiet, wearing her green dress, watching what felt like a verbal tug-of-war over her son. "Discipline, is it?" I edged toward the table, noticing the greasy plates and wine stains on his lips. "That's child abuse. You're lucky I'm not calling the police right now." "Child abuse?" Wilbur laughed, a chilling sound that sent a cold wave through me. "He forgot to turn off a stove and ruined a $20 turkey. I told him to step outside and reflect. That's not abuse. It's called parenting. 4 hours in 5-degree weather? He's just being overly dramatic as usual." Wilbur dismissed the situation with a wave as if swatting away a fly. "Just look at him, he's fine. A little cold never hurt anyone." I turned to see Amos wrapped in my coat, lips blue and body shaking. Fine? Did this man really think that was fine? "Dad, please," Leona finally spoke with a trembling voice. "Let's not ruin the holiday. We can resolve this as a family later." "Ruin your holiday?" I turned to my daughter. "Your son was freezing while you were eating dinner, and you're worried about ruining your holiday." She lowered her gaze to her plate, avoiding eye contact. Wilbur thought he was teaching Amos about responsibility. "Sometimes boys need firm guidance," he said. "Firm guidance?" I asked in disbelief. "Leona, when you were 18 and dinged my truck, did I lock you outside in a snowstorm? When you failed a math test, did I make you sleep in the garage?" "That's different," she muttered. "How?" I demanded. "How is it any different?" Wilbur stepped between us, his face red with anger. "Because this is my house, and Amos isn't my biological son. I have every right to discipline him as I see fit." There it was, the truth out in the open. Amos wasn't his flesh and blood, so in his eyes, Amos didn't matter, just a problem to be controlled and punished. "You've got 30 seconds to apologize to my grandson," I said in a calm but deadly tone. 30 seconds to show some basic human decency." Wilbur's laughter grew even colder. "I don't owe that boy anything. If he doesn't like my rules, he's free to find somewhere else to live." The little girl cried even more now, and though Leona was trying to soothe her, I barely noticed. All I could focus on was Wilbur's arrogant smirk. My mind was filled with thoughts of Amos, who sat on those steps for hours, wrongly thinking he deserved it. I moved in closer, enough to catch the scent of wine on Wilbur's breath. "You're right, he's going somewhere else," I said, while I slipped my phone out of my jacket pocket, my thumb hovering over the keypad. I made sure everyone saw what I was doing, taking my time on purpose. Wilbur's face shifted when he noticed the phone, his confidence wavering. "Apologize to my grandson now," I said firmly, "or I'll contact Child Protective Services and report this abuse." "You wouldn't dare," Wilbur shot back, stepping closer to try and intimidate me with his size. But I'd faced tougher guys than him, and wasn't backing down from anyone harming my family. Try me. I started dialing. I've got plenty to share about leaving an 18-year-old outside in the freezing cold for hours. Amos gripped my arm tightly. I felt him trembling, but it wasn't from the cold anymore. It was a different kind of fear, the fear that arises when speaking up makes things worse. "Dad, please," Leona interjected, stepping between us to cool down the tension. "Don't tear our family apart over this." I looked at her and then Wilbur, fixing my gaze. "I'm not tearing anything apart," I said. "He did that when he decided to mistreat my grandson." "Abuse?" Wilbur let out a bitter laugh. "I was just teaching him responsibility, something his weak mom never did," he sneered at Leona, who didn't fight back. Wilbur raised his voice and said, "Get out of my house, old man. You don't have any say here. Amos is my responsibility now." I glanced around the dining room, the fancy glasses, the elegant china, the centerpiece, then back at Amos's bruised face. "Is this how you handle responsibility? By forcing kids to suffer in the cold?" Wilbur's younger daughter cried louder, frightened by the shouting. Leona comforted her while keeping an eye on Wilbur and me like she was watching a tense match. "He's not a kid. He's 18, Wilbur insisted, standing tall. "And in my house, adults who can't follow simple rules face consequences." Adult-sized consequences, that's what he called it. All because of a forgotten timer, a mishap during the holidays, and causing a scene in front of family. Wilbur gestured to the empty chairs that had been filled before I arrived. Everyone had left due to his outburst. As I looked at those chairs, another piece of the puzzle fit into place. There had been guests, people inside enjoying dinner while Amos froze outside, and not one of them intervened. "Grandpa, let's just go," Amos whispered behind me, his tone low and nearly pleading, not wanting more trouble. It broke something inside me to hear him, such a kind, smart young man, feel like it was his fault, like seeking kindness was wrong. "You're not the problem," I said for all to hear. "You've never been the problem." Facing Wilbur, my mind was perfectly clear. "You have 30 seconds to apologize to my grandson for today." Wilbur crossed his arms defiantly. "I'm not apologizing for anything," he retorted, "and I'm not taking orders from an old fool who's in denial that his grandson needs discipline." "Then we're done here," I said, slipping my phone away. "Amos, pack your things. You're coming with me." The room fell silent. Even the little girl stopped crying briefly. "You can't just take him," Leona whispered. "Watch me," I replied, firmly putting a hand on Amos's shoulder, guiding him away from the table and toward the stairs. "Go get what you need. We're leaving." "Dad, you can't do this," Leona protested, panic rising in her voice. "You can't just come into our house and take my son." "I can, and I am," I told her, keeping Amos shielded. "Unless you'd like me to involve the authorities and let them handle this." Amos hurried up the stairs, his pace quick yet unsteady, with Wilbur's heavy footfalls following closely. "This is kidnapping," Wilbur yelled. "I'll have you charged with kidnapping." "Good luck justifying why my grandson was left outside in 5-degree weather for 4 hours, I retorted. When we got to the top, Amos directed me down a short hallway to a small, cramped room at the back of the house. It lacked proper heating, with just a tiny window facing north. It felt more like a storage closet than a bedroom, and was definitely the least appealing room in the house. "This is where you sleep?" I asked, glancing around at the sparse furnishings. Amos nodded, hurriedly tossing clothes into a duffel from the dresser. "Wilbur insists the basement's for guests, and the other upstairs room belongs to my sister." He never said our sister. He was clearly an outsider here. "Take everything you need," I instructed, standing guard while he packed. "We're not coming back." "Amos, reconsider this." Leona spoke from the doorway, tears streaking down her cheeks. "This is your home, your family." "Some family," Amos grumbled, throwing a Dayton University sweatshirt into his bag. Real families don't leave you out in the cold. Responsibility isn't taught through hypothermia. Amos faced his mother, his eyes full of years of disappointment and anger. "Mom, I had to sleep in the garage last week because I left a glass in the sink." "A glass? That's just wrong." Leona looked crushed. He sets high standards. He wants you to succeed." "No, he wants me out," Amos said quietly as he zipped up his bag. "And you know it." We went downstairs, where Wilbur stood at the bottom like a sentry. "Get out of my house, boy. Don't ever come back." "Works for me," Amos replied, his voice finally firm. The front door hung open from when I'd pushed it in, letting the bitter cold seep inside. The chilly breeze swept through, making the holiday decorations quiver like dried leaves. My truck was still running in the driveway, its engine purring and exhaust puffing in the frigid air. As we reached the door, Leona called, "Amos, please don't do this. I love you." He stopped briefly, glancing back at his mother. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have let this happen." We walked to my truck in silence, our breaths creating misty clouds in the icy air. I tossed his bag into the bed, helped him into the passenger seat, then climbed in myself. Through the front window, I could see them, Leona sobbing, Wilbur seething, and a little girl peeking out. "Ready?" I asked as I backed the truck up. "I've been ready for 3 years," Amos said, pulling my coat tighter around him. As we drove away, passing houses where families were likely finishing their Thanksgiving celebrations peacefully, the classic rock on the truck's radio played on, and the heater worked perfectly. For the first time since I'd arrived, Amos appeared to loosen up and breathe easier. "Thanks, Grandpa," he softly offered as we headed towards the highway. "I can't believe you came for me. I should have been here sooner," I confessed sincerely. "I should have known something was wrong. I tried to tell you, but I just didn't know how." A calm settled over us as we drove, the familiar duty of family resting on my shoulders like Martha's favorite quilt. This boy needed protection, a place where he could heal and grow. "Tell me about college," I asked as we merged onto I-75 North. "What are you studying?" "Engineering," he answered, his voice gaining strength. "Mechanical engineering, like you did at the factory." Just like his grandpa. I smiled, knowing Martha would be proud. "We'll handle the tuition, don't worry about that." "Grandpa, I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden, son. You're family, and family looks out for each other." With both trucks squeezed into the driveway, the house felt smaller, but it still exuded a welcoming warmth as we approached. I'd left the porch light on as a habit, casting an inviting glow through the chilly winter darkness. "Home, sweet home," I remarked while helping Amos with his bag to the front door. The key slid in easily, and we were greeted by a burst of warm air. Inside, the comforting smell of coffee mingled with the scent of Martha's lavender sachets. The place wasn't extravagant, a simple ranch with some worn-out furniture and tired carpet, but it was all ours, and fully paid for. "Remember where the guest room is?" I asked, flipping on lights as we strolled through the living room. "Yeah, it's by your room, down the hall," Amos replied, visibly relaxing. "It feels so nice and warm in here. Thermostat's set at 72 degrees all year long. Your grandma always said life's too short to be cold at home." I led him to the guest room, making sure he was comfortable. Extra blankets are in the closet, just in case. The room was straightforward yet inviting, with a double bed decked out in one of Martha's cozy quilts, a dresser, and a reading chair by the window. Photos of family events were sprinkled on the walls, showing Amos at various ages. It had always been his room during visits, and seeing him there now felt right. It was a comfort I hadn't experienced since Martha passed. "I'll get dinner going," I said. "Nothing fancy. Some chicken and veggies we need to use up." "Want a hand with it?" he asked, eager to help out. "Sure thing. But remember, this is your home now, not a chore." We got to work in the kitchen, and gradually the tension from Amos's day began to ease. I zapped the chicken in the microwave to thaw it, while he rinsed the vegetables. We moved around each other with the comfortable ease of family who'd cooked together often enough. "Catch me up on what's been happening," I said as I sprinkled seasoning over the chicken. "Start with when your mom married Wilbur." Amos paused, thinking quietly for a moment. Deciding what to share weighed on my mind. It started small, with little criticisms about my dishwasher habits or leaving shoes out of place. But then, it snowballed. It's gotten a lot worse now. He dictates everything: when I eat, what I eat, when I take a shower, even when I can use the phone. Amos' voice softened with each word. He forced my mom to pick between us, and she chose him. I put down the seasoning, grasping the counter. "What do you mean she chose him? Remember Christmas, when you came over and I barely spoke at dinner? Wilbur told me not to talk unless spoken to, and Mom didn't say a word against it." The realization hit me hard. I thought Amos was just being a typical moody teenager. I even joked with Martha about how kids today couldn't hold a conversation. "Why doesn't your mom stand up to him? She's scared." As Amos neatly chopped carrots, he said she feared losing the house and going back to the apartments we lived in before. She can't provide for us on her own. I placed the chicken in the oven and set about kindling a fire in the living room fireplace. The familiar task of crumpling paper and stacking wood helped calm my thoughts. "Come sit with me," I invited as the fire crackled. "Tell me the good stuff. How's school? Your friends?" Nestled in the chairs by the fire, Amos finally grinned. "Last semester I made the dean's list and met Jake, who's teaching me guitar. Your grandma always dreamed of learning guitar." I pointed at a photo on the mantel of a young Martha joyfully holding a guitar. "She always said music was the soul's language." I remember that. Amos studied the picture closely. "I miss her." "Me too, son. Me too." We stayed by the fire until the chicken was ready, talking about Martha and planning the upcoming semester for Amos. The house was alive again with conversation and laughter, reminiscent of the days when Martha filled it with warmth. As we tucked into our simple but delicious meal, I took a good look at my grandson. The fear in his eyes had faded, replaced by something I hadn't seen in a while: hope. "I'll give the college a ring tomorrow," I said while slicing my chicken. "We need to confirm your financial aid's all wrapped up, and we can think about a part-time gig if you're interested. Grandpa, you don't have to handle all this for me." "But I do," I insisted, meeting his gaze. "That's what family does." Just when we were polishing off our leftover pie for dessert, the phone went off abruptly, breaking the tranquil evening vibe. Amos instantly tensed. I glanced at the caller ID, feeling my jaw clench. It was Leona. Then 3 loud knocks rattled the front door, cutting through the soothing crackle of the fire. They were neither friendly taps nor unsure knocks. They were the kind of heavy smacks that demanded immediate attention. Amos almost dropped his mug of coffee. "Grandpa, stay behind me," I instructed, setting my cup down and moving to the door. The knocking got more urgent, with multiple voices buzzing outside. I clicked on the porch light and peeked through the peephole. 2 police officers in uniform were standing there, and just behind them, looking ready to pounce, were Wilbur and Leona. "Mr. Burke," the lead officer called. "Police, we need to talk." I took a deep breath and opened the door, blocking their view of Amos. "What can I do for you, officers?" Wilbur pushed forward immediately, pointing a finger at me. "Officer, this man kidnapped my stepson. He barged into our home and took the boy without permission." The lead officer, who looked pretty worn out, signaled Wilbur to stop. "Sir, we need to clear this up. Mr. Burke, do you have a young man named Amos Green here?" "Yeah," I replied simply. "My grandson is here." Wilbur's accusations rose in volume. He broke into our home like some kind of thug, snatched the boy, and took him away from his family. The second officer asked if Amos was here willingly while flipping open a notepad. Before I could answer, Amos, wrapped in a couch blanket, appeared next to me. In a quiet but firm voice, he said, "I want to stay with my grandpa." Wilbur's face flushed as he accused me of filling the boy's head with lies and turning him against his family. What lies? I questioned, stepping forward. The truth about abandoning him in the cold and 3 years of mistreatment. Wilbur laughed, though it sounded forced. He claimed he was teaching Amos responsibility after ruining Thanksgiving dinner, implying there were consequences to be learned. The first officer watched us with a look that said he's seen one too many family dramas. "Mr. Burke," he said, "we need everyone inside to discuss this properly." I led everyone into the living room. Wilbur stormed in, followed closely by Leona, who kept her eyes on the floor. She seemed smaller, like she finally realized the impact of her actions. "All right," the officer began, pulling out his notepad again. "Let's start. Mr. Green, you claim this man took your stepson?" "Absolutely," Wilbur replied, adopting a posture of someone in authority. He described discovering the broken door and Amos missing, and neighbors mentioned an older man taking the boy in a truck. "Forcibly?" I retorted skeptically. "Officer, I rescued my grandson from abuse." "That's his excuse," Wilbur said, shaking his head. "He's never approved of my marriage to his daughter and just wants to create problems." The officer turned to Amos, who was standing so close I could feel him trembling. "Son, were you forced to come here?" "No, sir," Amos whispered softly. "He saved me." "Saved you from what?" the officer asked. Amos looked at Wilbur, then back at the officer. "From getting frostbite on the porch." The second officer perked up. "Explain that." Amos said he accidentally burned the turkey, and as punishment, Wilbur made him sit outside for more than 4 hours in the freezing weather. "He's overreacting," Wilbur quickly interrupted. "It was an hour and he was dressed warmly." "An hour?" I challenged. "Officer, witnesses saw my grandson in a thin shirt and jeans on that porch since 11 a.m. The officer looked at Wilbur. "Did you make him sit outside?" "Briefly, yes," Wilbur admitted. "But he's exaggerating about the temperature." His confident act started to falter. "Teenagers need discipline sometimes." His mom and I agreed. "Mom didn't agree to anything," Amos corrected, his voice firmer now. "She just didn't stop you." Everyone's gaze turned to Leona, who had been silent up until now. She hovered by the doorway as if ready to bolt, hands tightly intertwined. "Ma'am," the officer prompted, "what's your story?" Leona faced a precipice, aware her words could either save or doom her. Her hands quivered as she looked at Wilbur's expectant expression and Amos's hopeful gaze. "Mrs. Green," the officer gently continued, "we need the truth about today." Wilbur edged closer to her, using intimidation to silently pressure her. "Tell them, honey. Explain how your father's been turning Amos against us." The officer took note. "Sir, step back and let her speak." Leona's voice was barely a whisper at first, but she cleared her throat and tried again. "Yes, Amos burned the turkey." The officer urged her on, and she hesitated, feeling Wilbur's intense stare and frustration pressing down on her. Wilbur claimed that leaving Amos outside in the bitter cold was supposed to teach him responsibility. Leona just nodded, looking distraught. It was, according to Wilbur, a lesson in caution for Amos. "How long was he kept outside, ma'am?" the officer asked, casting a quick glance at Wilbur, who was stiff and simmering with anger. "Around 11, she said softly, sneaking another wary look at Wilbur. "And when did he come back inside?" Her voice grew smaller. "When my dad got home, around 3:15. The officer did the math. It was over 4 hours in temperatures just above zero. "She's exaggerating," Wilbur interrupted. "Amos knew he could come in if he apologized and showed remorse." "No, he couldn't," Leona suddenly burst out, and everyone turned to her. "The door was locked. You told me not to let him in, no matter what." The room fell into tense silence. Wilbur's face turned pale, flushed with anger, then pale again. "Leona," he said, in a low, threatening voice, "what are you doing?" "I'm telling the truth," she replied, glancing at Amos as tears started to form. For the first time in 3 years, I'm being honest. The officer leaned closer. Mrs. Green, has this form of punishment happened before? Yes. The word came out as if it had been trapped forever. He's made Amos sleep in the garage, the basement, even left him outside all night. Leona's voice grew stronger with each revelation. He controls when Amos eats, showers, and can speak at the dinner table. Leona, stop. Wilbur's facade shattered. You don't understand what you're doing. You'll ruin everything we've built. Built? She turned on him, her anger rising. What have we built besides a life full of fear and sadness? Look at my son. Look at the damage you've done. Seeing Amos, it was clear his face changed as his mother finally stood up for him. Years of doubt and self-blame seemed to fade, and he realized someone understood the reality of his suffering. The first officer stepped up to Wilbur. Sir, please turn around and put your hands behind your back. This is absurd. Wilbur slowly edged towards the door. You're arresting me based on the claims of a bitter old man and his crazy daughter? The officer remained calm, taking out his handcuffs. We have physical evidence and multiple testimonies related to child endangerment, he explained. You have the right to remain silent. As they read Wilbur his rights and began to escort him out, he shot a venomous glance back at Leona. You'll regret this betrayal. You'll lose everything. The house, the money, all of it. You'll be nothing without me. I'd rather be nothing than watch you harm my son, she replied, her voice stronger than it had been in years, reminiscent of the woman who once raised Amos alone. As the officers and Wilbur left, we all remained in the living room. Leona sank into a chair and began to cry, no longer the quiet tears of before, but deep sobs rooted in long-buried pain. Amos rushed to her side, kneeling by her chair. Mom, it's okay. It's over. I'm so sorry, she whispered through her tears. I should have protected you. I should have been tougher. You really showed strength tonight, I mentioned, leaning back in my chair by the fire. When it truly counted, you chose your son over your husband. That took real bravery. The fire crackled gently, and for the first time in months, my house felt genuinely welcoming. It wasn't just about my family's safety, it was knowing the truth was out and justice was in motion. Amos glanced up from where he was kneeling next to his mom. What happens now, Grandpa? He asked. Now, we begin to heal, I answered simply. We take our time and start healing. Fast forward 4 months, and the morning sun warmly filled my kitchen as Leona was flipping pancakes. Amos was at the table, still awestruck by his acceptance letter to Ohio State's engineering program. A full scholarship, he noted for the 10th time that week, still amazed. They're actually paying me to go to school. That's what you get when you're smart and hard-working, Leona replied, setting a pile of pancakes on his plate. She seemed different now, more self-assured and stronger. Her part-time library job gave her the kind of independence she never had before, and the divorce settlement gave her the means to start anew. Your grandma would have been so proud, I commented as I sat down with my coffee. The kitchen buzzed with life again, filled with talk, laughter, and the delightful mess of a real family. After Wilbur's conviction, Leona moved in for good. She made the guest room hers, and we transformed the basement into a comfy bedroom for Amos. Gone were those dreadful confinement cell replicas from Wilbur's time, just a warm, inviting space with proper heating and windows that opened. Dad, are you really okay with us staying for the long run? Leona asked as she took her seat. I know you like your independence. Independence is overrated, I said, meaning every bit of it. Family is what truly matters. Besides, who's going to keep Amos from burning the kitchen down when he cooks? That happened only once, Amos laughed, and it was a small fire. The phone rang, and Leona picked it up. Burke residence. Oh, hey, Jake. Yeah, he's here. Guitar practice at 4? Sure, I'll let him know. She turned to us after hanging up. Jake wants to know if you're joining the talent show rehearsal. The talent show? I asked, raising an eyebrow. You didn't mention a talent show. Amos grinned, looking like the confident young man he was turning into. It's nothing big. Jake and I are playing some acoustic classic rock songs you probably know. I'll be right there in the front row cheering you on, I promised. Later, I discovered Leona in the living room, sorting through new family photos for the mantel next to Martha's pictures. There was one from Amos's high school graduation we missed due to everything with Wilbur, one from last month's fishing trip, and one from our Christmas morning, the first real family Christmas in years. So, any updates about Wilbur? I asked, not sure I wanted to hear it. His lawyer called yesterday. He's doing all right with the anger management therapy, but he lost his supermarket job. She shrugged, showing little sympathy. He's moving back to Cleveland to live with his sister. Good. The farther away, the better. Sometimes I feel a bit sorry for him, she admitted. But then I remember what he did to Amos, and that feeling vanishes quickly. That afternoon, Leona and I worked in the garden, getting Martha's vegetable patch ready while Amos was at guitar practice. It seemed like spring was arriving early this year, and there was something refreshing about planting and planning for the future. Dad, Leona started, pulling weeds with determination, thank you again for what you did. If you hadn't come that day. You don't owe me any thanks, I cut in, while dealing with a stubborn clump of earth. I just did what any grandparent would do. No, you didn't. You risked everything to save him. You could have been arrested or even charged with kidnapping. But I wasn't. The truth tends to come out. She smiled, wiping dirt from her hands. Martha used to say that. A wise woman she was, far wiser than I ever was. That evening, we slipped into our usual family groove. We ate dinner together, then watched whatever game show or movie happened to be airing. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was just what we all needed. Steady, peaceful, and safe. Amos quietly strummed his guitar in the corner. Leona was deep into her crossword puzzle, and I took a moment to catch up with the newspaper. Regular family stuff that seemed out of reach not too long ago. Grandpa, Amos said during a commercial break, I've been thinking about changing my major. Really? From engineering to what exactly? I asked. Maybe social work or counseling, he said, putting his guitar down and meeting my eyes. I want to help other kids who went through what I did. I felt a rush of pride so intense it nearly knocked the wind out of me. There he was, a young man with every reason to be resentful, yet he wanted to turn his experiences into something positive for others. That's a noble goal, I said. Your grandma always believed that the best way to heal from your own wounds is to help others avoid them. Did she actually say that? She sure did, along with countless other wise sayings I should have paid more attention to. As the evening rolled on, and Leona drifted to sleep in her chair, Amos and I wandered outside We went out onto the back porch to watch the stars. The sky was clear and crisp, a stark contrast to that awful Thanksgiving night when I found him shaking on Wilbur's doorstep. Looking forward to the fishing season? I asked. Can't wait, he said. Think we'll reel in something bigger than last year? With your luck, we'll probably snag a whale. We stood there, two Berkman generations who'd reconnected through tough times and honest conversations. Soon, Amos would head to college and eventually start his own life. But our bond was strong now, grounded in honesty, protection, and unconditional love. As we turned back to head inside, Amos said, Grandpa. Yeah? I asked. Thanks for coming to get me. Thanks for being someone worth saving. The house felt inviting and warm as we locked up for the night. We knew now that family wasn't just about sharing blood. It was about showing up, being truthful even when it's hard, and doing whatever it takes to protect the ones you care about. Martha would be proud of all of us.